Our story begins in the 6th century AD, when the minds of men are still steeped in the mists of ignorance and superstition. Then Mecca appears on the map of the world, and the radiant light of Islam spreads outwards. For the first time in human history, the concept of the equality and brotherhood of man begins to encompass the earth. Within 80 years of the Holy Prophet's death, the standard bearers of the new faith carry its liberating tenets to the outermost regions of the known world. The Arabs have traded with the Indo-Pakistan subcontinent since pre-Islamic times. Then, by one of those accidents which changed the course of history, a stray attack by Hindu pirates on Arab ships leads to the invasion of Sindh by Muhammad bin Qasim. Muhammad bin Qasim marches northwards and soon governs the area as far as Multan. For 3 years, he ruled with benevolence and justice, laying the foundations of an enlightened administration and setting the course for the future. Excavations at Bhambor, near Karachi, reveal the remains of what was probably Deval, the first city to fall to Muhammad bin Qasim. And these are the 1,300-year-old foundations of the subcontinent's oldest mosque, from whose minarets the muezzin first called the faithful to prayer in this ancient land. A new, dynamic, and thriving civilization has come into being, in which there is equality for all, and complete freedom of worship. The land to which the Muslims came was the home of one of the world's oldest urban civilizations. The city-states of the Indus Valley, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, were probably destroyed by the invading Aryans, a martial race which brought with it pagan and primitive beliefs, deifying natural phenomena. In the subcontinent, the Aryans developed Hinduism based on a pantheistic creed and a rigid caste system. In the 6th century BC came the reformers. Lord Buddha was the greatest of them. He and the others preached against the manifest inequalities of Hindu society. But the caste system is too deeply rooted in the soil, and Buddhism is exiled forever from the land of its birth.
1,500 years go by. Then Mahmud of Ghazni moves in from Afghanistan, and most of what is now West Pakistan comes within the orbit of the Islamic world. In the 12th century AD, Muhammad Ghori is the just and generous ruler of the upper subcontinent. His prosperous dominions pass to his able general, Qutubuddin Aibak, and thus is born the Sultanate of Delhi. The Qutub Minar immortalizes his name. His successor Iltutmish is another enlightened ruler, and the Sultanate becomes one of the world's foremost Muslim states, where learning and the arts flourish. Alauddin Khilji is the greatest ruler of the next dynasty, whose influence extends over the whole subcontinent. With the Tughlaqs, another illustrious house ascends the throne of Delhi. They extend their dominions, but are followed by weak rulers, under whom the Sultanate decays. In 1398, Tehmud Lane, the scourge of the medieval world, sweeps down on a disintegrated subcontinent. For 50 years afterwards, there is no strong central authority. Under the Sultanate, a great new culture has evolved. In Amir Khusro, it produces a mystic poet and musician of the first magnitude. With the advent of Islam have also come the great Muslim saints and sages. Hazrat Data Ganj Bakhsh, famed for a celebrated work on mysticism, Kashful Mehjoob. Khwaja Muinuddin Chisti of Ajmer. Nizamuddin Aulia. Shah Jalal Tabrizi. They love God and serve their fellow men. Their piety and dedication wins over millions to Islam. The Muslim rulers are tolerant and just, but the Brahman does not accept the gospel of human brotherhood. Soon it is clear that two distinct societies are growing up within the same land. The two-nation theory has very deep roots in our history. Guru Nanak attempts the synthesis of the two communities and creates a third, the Sikhs. In 1526, Babur founds the immortal dynasty of the Mughals, who for 200 long years shed splendor and glory over the land. Warrior, poet, author, Babur is the prince of diarists in an age when monarchs barely know to read or write. Babur has won a great empire. His son Humayun is forced into exile by Sher Shah Suri, who administers the land on an exemplary pattern. Then Humayun returns, and with him Mughal rule. The next emperor, Akbar, is the greatest of the Mughals. His bravery, foresight and tolerance are legendary. Mughal rule is extended to Bengal, Gujarat and the Deccan. To win over loyalties, he marries Rajput princesses. Among his wives is Austrian Princess Mariam Zamani. Akbar has a flair for surrounding himself with men of genius, irrespective of race or religion. Around him are brilliant Muslim and Hindu advisors, generals, financial experts, divines, scholars and poets. In this painting, we see Abul Fazl, one of Akbar's great ministers, presenting a copy of his celebrated Ain-e-Akbari to the great Mughal. The resources of the empire were first catalogued and enumerated in this unique book. But in spite of Akbar's tolerance and desire to weld the two great communities into one nation, vast differences remain. The bearing, appearance and mode of dress of Akbar's Muslim courtiers in this painting contrast sharply with their Hindu counterparts. The Mughals were renowned for their dispensation of justice. And Jahangir is the exemplar in this sphere. The lowest in the realm had direct access to the emperor, night or day. His consort, Noor Jahan, light of the world, leads the women of her time in refinement and taste. Jahangir too is a poet and writer, and his autobiography ranks in importance with the memoirs of his illustrious great-grandfather, giving enchanting glimpses of the empire in his times. The Mughals are his chiefs, and the next emperor, Shah Jahan, leaves behind memories of unparalleled splendor. His is the golden age of Mughal rule. The years of his reign are prosperous and peaceful. A keen lover of the hunt, he has leisure enough to pursue the arts of peace. He expresses himself exquisitely in architecture, to which he has devoted much of his life. Along with his beloved Queen Mumtaz Mahal, he rests in the world's most magnificent mausoleum.
Aurangzeb ascends the imperial throne in 1658. For half a century, he forges an empire greater than under any other dynasty. His administrative genius and profound piety have been widely acclaimed. He is tolerant towards the Hindus. Their places of worship enjoy imperial subsidies. The Badshahi Mosque at Lahore, the largest Muslim house of prayer in the world, was built in his times. Aurangzeb's reign is a fitting climax to the story of the great Mughals. Learning flourished during their benevolent rule. Art and culture reached new pinnacles. There was peace and prosperity. Hindus and Muslims remained reasonably united. When their confident hand is lifted, the edifice begins to crack and crumble.
Successors of Aurangzeb are weak. Within 50 years of his passing, the provinces have broken away and many new kingdoms appear. The Marathas come to power and are followed by the Sikhs. We now go back in time to see the Europeans fixing their gaze on the riches of this land. At the end of the 15th century AD, Vasco da Gama rounds the Cape of Good Hope and shows the way. The Zamorin of Cochin allows the Portuguese trading rights. The Dutch and the French are also in the field. In 1601, Elizabeth I of England grants the merchants of London a royal charter to form the East India Company and trade with the subcontinent. Sir Thomas Roe is the English envoy at the court of Jahangir. Enlightened Mughal rulers and their viceroys continue to give trading facilities to the foreigners who acquire territory to build their factories. The legendary wealth of the Indies is now being slowly drained away. To protect its business ventures, the company built strongholds. The ramparts of Fort St. George, Bombay Castle, and Fort William loom ominously on the Indian coastline. By the beginning of the 18th century, the company is prosperous enough to need further military support. Its cadre of sepoys trained on western lines seems harmless enough, but it is the thin edge of the wedge. Robert Clive establishes the first strong foothold for the English. Intervening in the wars of local kingdoms round about Madras, Clive defeats the French under Dupleix, who are naturally on the other side. British influence and supremacy are established in the Carnatic and northern circles. Clive's well-trained and disciplined sepoys are more than a match for indigenous mercenaries. The traders are now turning conquerors. Clive next turns to Bengal, where the young and patriotic Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowlah is bent on resisting the inroads of the British. Siraj-ud-Dowlah's chief minister, Mir Jafar, is bribed by Clive. His army suffer a crushing defeat at Plassey. The traitors pay the price for treachery as Clive, probing for fresh conquests, defeats them at Buxar. The Mughal Emperor Shah Alam is compelled to confirm the company's rights over the revenues of Bengal and Bihar.
In the south, Hyder Ali of Mysore begins a resolute struggle to curtail the growing power of the English. Simultaneously, he also has to fight the Marathas who are encroaching on his frontiers. A united front against the foreign invaders might well have changed the course of history, but this was not to be. Hyder Ali holds his own against the British. But his victories are confined to battles. In the meanwhile, the war goes on. And then against British dominion rises the figure of Tipu Sultan of Mysore, a great soldier and general, but above all, a burning patriot. His paramount concern is to expel the foreign invaders. At first, he fights the British alone, and perhaps the British alone he might have overcome. Then the Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad join forces with the foreigners. With his compatriots, he pleads for help. The Marathas make a great concession to their homeland and eventually withdraw their armies to a neutral stand. The Nizam of Hyderabad remains unmoved by his country's future plight, or perhaps he lacks the vision. Tipu is surrounded by the converging armies, but the patriot is not yet ready to yield. The Muslim powers of Arabia, Kabul and Turkey, all are petitioned by Tipu. In Europe, Napoleon himself is approached. But it is Tipu's destiny to fight on alone. Tipu dies like a soldier, sword in hand, at the gates of his capital, Seringapatam. But his legend lives on as the greatest freedom fighter in Muslim history. Now the British moving towards Afghanistan find themselves in Sindh. The opportunity is not lost. In a series of unprovoked attacks, they subdue the heroic Mirs. Napier, punning weakly, has sinned. Further north, the Sikh kingdom enters on its last years. A prey to dissensions after the death of the great Ranjit Singh, the Sikh Confederacy is now degenerate and bankrupt in leadership. Vainly it faces the British hosts. Its defeat and surrender are ignominious. Earlier, the Mujahids, under the leadership of Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi and Shah Ismail, held aloft the banner of freedom against the Sikh rule. Faced with a force superior in numbers, their valiant effort is frustrated. In Bengal, the Mujahid leader, Titu Mir, fought the British tooth and nail and met a glorious death in the battlefield. The religious movement of Haji Shariatullah also played a major part in the awakening of the Muslims of Bengal. Kashmir, the priceless valley, is sold by the British to Raja Gulab Singh for a pittance, 75 lakhs of rupees. Now, among the Muslim states, only Awadh remains. Summarily, on the pretext of mismanagement, Awadh is annexed.
The British yoke is obnoxious to patriots everywhere. Suddenly, feelings come to the boil. On May the 10th, 1857, in Meerut, the company's sepoys and their Indian officers revolt. They storm Delhi, free the aging Mughal Bahadur Shah Zafar from the fort, and proclaim him emperor. Mighty forces are now abroad, and the petty revolt has overnight become a war of liberation. But from the start, the movement is doomed to failure, mighty though it is. There are too many who choose to fight against their own countrymen, nor is the struggle coordinated. One by one, Jhansi, Meerut, Kanpur and Lucknow fall. After a fierce and prolonged siege, Delhi itself is invested and sacked. The Muslims have led the struggle and now suffer the consequences. Retaliation by the British, once begun, is inexorable and fierce. The redcoats loot and plunder at will. Entire cities are sacked. The executions are public and pitiless. The gloom of enslavement settles on the land as the last of Babur's descendants are sent into exile and captivity by India's new rulers. The British have now acquired an empire too big and important for a company to govern. On November the 1st, 1858, the British Crown takes over and assumes sovereignty of the subcontinent. The export of British India's wealth increases in volume. Local crafts and industries languish. The first symptoms of the Industrial Revolution appear. The newspapers have come, and English begins to replace Persian as the court language. The preaching of Christianity spreads. The tentacles of an alien culture are spreading insidiously over the subcontinent.
After 1857, the Hindu intelligentsia, eager to cooperate with the new alien regime, fills the void in public life. Meanwhile, the Muslims withdraw completely to the protection of their own culture. This social isolation leads inevitably to economic hardship. At the lowest ebb of their political, social and economic fortunes, the Muslims find in Sir Syed Ahmad Khan a fearless and far-sighted leader. In the teeth of opposition from the more orthodox among his own co-religionists, he stresses the need for modern education. He proclaims his ideas of educational and social reform by word of mouth and from the pages of endless books and publications.
To give concrete form to his ideas, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan founds in Aligarh the Muslim Anglo-Oriental College, the embryo of the renowned Aligarh University. In Bengal, Nawab Abdul Latif led the movement for the education of the Muslims.
Meanwhile, under revivalist leaders like Swami Vivekanand, the Hindus are developing a spirit of militant nationalism. They begin to dream of becoming the next rulers of the subcontinent. Old cults are revived. Tilak forms his cow protection society and pours venom against the Muslims and their culture. Increasingly, British India is now being populated by two separate nations. Realizing now that their subjects are once again ready for active politics, the British inspire the founding of the Indian National Congress by Allen Hume in 1885. The mirage of democracy to come deceives most Indian leaders, but the Muslims are advised to keep away by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. He correctly foresees that the Congress will in time be dominated by a Hindu majority and become an organ of Hindu political expression. On another front, the Hindus begin to undermine Muslim influence by attacking Urdu, which has formed a cultural bridge between the two communities. The British connive. In the Muslims, the seeds of distrust are sown.